You know that it is one of the common gynec problem that we face in day-to-day practice. At least 20 to 25% of the OPD attendants may be with the girls and ladies with this complaint. And it used to be the hysterectomy as a definitive treatment. Majority of the patients had hysterectomy in 1980s and even in the early part of 1990s. After which we have evolved many of the medical and conservative surgical methods. And I thought that it may be easier to group the patients as per their age group, adolescent and teenage and other things accordingly. We got very expert panel members for this. We have got 10 of them, very expert seniors and juniors mixed. And Dr. Ramesh Chandran, who is head of the Department of Government Medical College at Idiki, and is the president of Calicut Obstetrics and Gynecology Society. Along with her, we have got Rehin, who is at Kraft Verindalmana Center. And then we have got Professor Achit from Kannur Medical College, who is the head of the department there, who is the president-elect of our Kerala Federation. We have got Dr. Ashwadi, who is consultant in ARMC Aegis Hospital. We have got Dr. Shaiju Spray, who is the president of the Kannur Society, and also he has, to his credit, many awards from the FOXI. And one word extra that he is a candidate for the chairperson post of Midlife Management Committee. Please remember that. We have got Riaz Ali. He is from Maulana IVS, Maulana Hospital, Perindalmana.
It's running just about 10 minutes late.
It's okay. Okay. So my co-chairperson is in another one and she will be joining. Dr. Subhash Malia is the secretary of the Calicut Society and is a candidate for the chairperson post of endoscopy committee. Again, request that he should be considered. We have got Najmuddin, who is with the Kraft Perindalmana Hospital, and Dr. Divya Nair, who is a fertility specialist from Palakkad, who is also the secretary of the ONG Club of Palakkad. And then Dr. Reena, who is a consultant gynecologist with the Government of Health Services, Kerala Health Services, and she is the secretary of the Kollam ONG Society. So what I have done is, so because we are having 10 panelists, so I grouped them into 5 groups as teams, A, B, C, D, E, and which will be, the discussion will be facilitated by Dr. Remani Devi and myself. So first one is, scenario is adolescent girl who is brought to the doctor with a heavy menstrual bleeding. Now, what's the approach to this patient as regard to the diagnosis and management? I will ask the members of the team A.
Good evening, sir. I'm Jyoti, sir. I will be taking the first 2 questions and the next 2 by Dr. Raheen. Okay. So, the first question is, what all points on history you would like to gather? So here I would like to point out that at this age, 20% of the adolescent patients may have bleeding disorders. So the history should be pertaining to that. And the most common disorders we would like to rule out is von Willebrand's disease, thrombocytopenia. So we've got to ask them whether there is any history of excess bleeding from any injuries, gum bleeding, epistaxis, GI bleeding, a family history of bleeding disorders. And then I would like to find out whether she's having any thyroid disorders. Maybe she's congenital hypothyroid on drugs, and the thyroid may not be well controlled with the medication. And then I would like to rule out, find out at what age she attained menarche, whether her cycles are regular, or whether there is any evidence of AUBO. So for that, I would like to find out whether she is having any hyperandrogenism, recent weight gain, weight loss. She has excessive eating habit or excess exercise, or she has some psychological stress. And to come at a diagnosis, as I said, that we have to rule out bleeding disorders, of which the von Willebrand disease may be found in only 1% of the population, but a patient who is having an abnormal uterine bleeding, the incidence may be as high as 13%. And regarding the thrombocytic cytopenia, we have to find out whether there is ITP or a platelet dysfunction, which manifests as genetic defects in the platelet receptors, that is Bernard-Schollet syndrome or Glanzmann thrombocythemia, or whether she's having any hemopoietic malignancy, or whether she has any splenomegaly. Then, and this, we definitely have to rule out pregnancy complication, because there can be some sexual encounter, sexual assault by which the hymen may be bleeding, and pregnancy associated conditions, foreign body, and very rarely tumors like sarcoma botryoides or clear cell carcinoma of vagina has to be ruled out. On to Raheen for further examination and management.
That covers almost, I think, everything on that group. Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay. What the next? Investigation and examination for this.
Has
Yeah,
restricted
please.
everything. Actually, in examination, we have to check all the
Your
parameters, like from the whether the girl is having any pallor or any thyroid swellings or any other signs of acanthosis nigricans, that is sign indicative of an hyperandrogenism, etc. And whether she is having any other abdominal swellings or any other local examination, anything, any trauma or acute bleeding causes, anything we have to rule out in the general examination itself. And for investigation purpose, we have to do the complete hemogram along with the platelet count, platelet dysfunctions. We have to rule out any clotting abnormalities. If it is there, we have to find it out. Any factor VIII deficiencies or any other coagulopathies, especially the liver functions test, we have to rule out any coagulation abnormalities. We have to find it out in the investigations. And pregnancy, as madam said, pregnancy also we have to be kept in mind, because even if it is rare, we have to find it out whether it's a pregnancy associated with abortion or ectopic pregnancy. And regarding the management, we have to categorize like any acute hemorrhage or it is a chronic blood loss, and we have to manage it accordingly. If it is an acute hemorrhage, like if it is a acute loss and patient is not hemodynamically stable, we have to stabilize the patient before management, and we have to make a working diagnosis before it. And hello, imaging have to be done. In that itself, we will rule out the pregnancy and any organic cause and any structural cause. We have to find out any anatomical defects. We have to find out, and will manage accordingly. Regarding the management also, we have cyclical progesterone we can give for this young ladies. Before that, we have to consider the antifibrinolytics and NSAIDs for acute blood loss, and we can supplement the iron. Also for hormone therapy, we can consider with the progestins. Low dose ocipils we can consider for these young girls, and other hormone like medroxyprogesterone acetate and other things we are considering rarely. And
okay, that is an exhaustive management protocol.
I just wanted to add, sir.
Yeah, no, it is. I just want to stress: don't forget a chance of pregnancy, even though she is an adolescent girl, and also sexual abuse. And if it is any suspicion, you have to inform the police as per the POCSO. Also, please remember that. And then it is mainly conservative management, because she is a young girl. She is just started the period, maybe 1 year or 2 years. It may be an ovulatory, and that may be the reason for regular and heavy bleeding. So it may settle. So iron therapy, and then if necessary by hormonal control of the regularizing the cycle is the approach, and rarely we may have the other things. So bleeding disorders has to be considered. Pregnancy states have to be ruled out. Any sexual abuse in the present scenario of the as per the act and all, it is important to consider that, and to ask the question in the presence of the mother about a sexual contact and other thing. You may have to keep the girl alone and then ask about those things. Probably that may be, but otherwise you may not get the history. Even if you ask them, they may not come out with the history. So that is the importance of seeing an adolescent girl with abnormal uterine bleeding. Mainly approach is conservative, and you have covered everything. Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I'll request my co-chair to go on with the next case. Madam, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you take up the next one, please.
Yes.
It's projected.
Yeah. A 35-year-old Paris woman, she is P2, L2 and sterilized with the last childbirth of 7 years. She presents with a heavy menstrual bleeding of 8 to 10 days for the last 5 to 6 months with regular cycles. So, your approach for the diagnosis in this particular case, how will you first, then the next is, how will you manage an acute episode of heavy menstrual bleeding and long-term management options? It goes to Team C. Team C.
Hello.
Dr. Shaija Sandhu.
Yeah. Hello, madam.
Hello.
First of all, a big thanks to all of you for this wonderful opportunity for the Perindharmana team. It's a pleasure to be with Shekharan sir and Ramani madam once again. A 35-year-old para to life 2, as rightly mentioned by madam, we are in short looking at a lady with a regular cycles and a heavy menstrual flow. So probably the anovulatory part of it is ruled out. So we are more looking in terms of an ovulatory kind of abnormal uterine bleeding. Some of the most commonest causes would be to rule out a fibroid, which is one of the most commonest pathologies which can present like this, as well as issues like adenomyosis. So the approach would primarily be to rule out a structural lesion, which could be in the form of a fibroid, or it could be an adenomyoma, or a more generalized picture like an adenomyosis. So that would be the initial approach. Obviously, we need to look at her anemic status before we attempt to manage this patient, and also look at how significant the bleeding is before we approach to manage that acute episode. Dr. Riaz wants to add anything? Riaz, your audio.
Dr. Riaz, please. Yes.
Please take out that. Earphones. Yeah. Talk directly into the computer.
Hello.
If Riaz is having a connectivity issue, Riaz, are you audible?
Audible?
Yeah, it is. Please go on. Please go.
So I'll just confirm that it's only a cyclical bleeding, and we will rule out any intermenstrual spotting or any pelvic pain or pelvic discomfort, which will favor any intracavitary lesion or any anatomical pathology. So
He's having severe dysmenorrhea. So what maybe you are called? She is having dysmenorrhea.
Dysmenorrhea, then the causes could be adenomyosis or a fibroid uterus. So these are the causes that can cause severe dysmenorrhea along with the heavy menstrual flow.
He is also having intramenstrual bleeding.
Intramenstrual bleeding, then we should rule out an endometrial polyp or an endometrial lesions, polyp or endometrial fibroid, submucosal fibroid.
Okay.
So these are the possibilities we should rule out.
Now, my problem is she is having acute bleeding. How to control this? She is having heavy menstrual bleeding, acute heavy menstrual bleeding. That is my problem now.
The acute bleeding can be managed with tranexamic acid, NSAIDs like mefenamic acid we can add on. So we can deal with the acute bleeding with the tranexamic acid and mefenamic
Will you
acid.
give tranexamic acid for a heavy bleeding? How will you administer?
If it is, we can give oral tranexamic acid.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please.
The options are either oral or intravenous. Both works pretty well. Even the oral dose of tranexamic acid can generally start working within 2 to 3 hours, is what evidence would say. And the dose is anywhere between 500 to 1.5 grams, which you can give on a daily basis. That means if you're using a 500 milligram tablet, you can give it thrice daily and most of the times it generally stops. And if there is an associated pelvic pain or dysmenorrhea, a combination with an NSAID like a mefenamic acid can work wonders. That combination would work much better. It would relieve her of the pain as well as it would take care of the bleeding episode. So generally, the first approach for somebody who has a heavy menstrual bleeding with regular cycles, and I take it for granted that it is not a bleeding which has made her hemodynamically unstable, because then the scenario changes a little bit more.
She's anemic.
Yeah. Sir, much more than the anemia, I would be concerned about the hemodynamic stability factor. Just a factor of anemia need not straight away take it to an intravenous mode of management where we give reasonably high doses of estrogens and try to attempt to control that, or go on to even procedures like therapeutic curettage, which might be a very, very rare circumstance to take care of somebody who is relatively very unstable. But here I feel she is probably more stable. So look at the non-hormonal preparations in the form of a combination of tranexamic acid or mefenamic acid. And the intravenous option is always there to give it as a bolus. 15 milligram per kilogram would be the recommended dose. And you can give it in saline as an IV bolus, and that works wonders. I'm sure we are getting more and more comfortable to tranexamic acid these days. The other options being using either progesterone alone, or if the rest of the management, if you're planning to use a hormone, can be decided based upon the thickness of the endometrium. That's why a transvaginal ultrasound for a patient who's having such a bleeding episode can work wonders. If you're working on somebody with a denuded or a thin endometrium, it's always preferable to start with estrogens, build up that endometrium, and then control with a progesterone withdrawal. If you're working with a thick endometrium,
and what is the route? Which estrogen?
Yeah, estrogen we can give orally. Very much we can give orally. There are oral preparations of Premarin available. We can give it at a dose of around 2.5 milligram, which can be started maybe from twice daily to thrice daily. There are studies which have quoted that you can give it even up to 5 times daily if there is a significant bleeding episode to build up the endometrium. And once the endometrium has been built up, then obviously we need to give progesterones, and for a period of at least 7 to 10 days, and then withdraw her bleeding. Otherwise, if it is a relatively thick endometrium, you can stabilize that endometrium with progesterones, either a medroxyprogesterone acetate or a norethistron or a norethindrone. Medroxyprogesterone acetone is something which we always know at a dose of around 10 to 20 milligrams. We can give it almost 2 to 3 times a day. Or a norethindrone or a norethistron at 5 to 10 milligram almost 2 to 3 times a day, and that generally controls the acute bleeding episode.
Very good, very good. Covered everything. And how will you carry on with the long-term management for this patient?
Long-term management the main thing we can do is LNG IUS. This diaphragm device system can be used. If the patient is not agreeing to the levonorgestrel devices like Mirena, then other options would be like combined oral contraceptive pills or cyclical progestogens. We can use low-dose cyclical oral contraceptive pills or progestogens like an orthostrone. Then the option, if it's still not controlling, and even after 6 months to 1 year of cyclical progestogens or combined doses.
Good, that's okay. Good. Okay.
Would you like to use GnRH analogs in this patient if she is not getting controlled? Because you are thinking in terms of adenomyosis.
Sir, may I just add? Sir, may I just add?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, please. Yes, please. Carry on, Subhash. You are not.
I think there's a network issue. If I am allowed to add on,
yes,
not
please.
to forget the possibility of a structural lesion that obviously will have to be removed if that is appearing to be the primary cause of bleeding.
That we are
Something
coming.
like an endometrial polyp will have to be dealt with hysteroscopically. Some with an intracavitary fibroid, which is causing this bleeding, also better be tackled surgically if that is the primary culprit.
So we are coming to that.
Sir, if I just have a clarification, sir.
Yeah.
If you're thinking in terms of putting a patient on progesterone or any hormone for that matter, sir, I personally would like to definitely take a biopsy, sir, before I put in a long-term management, sir. I think I will definitely go for a biopsy. Nowadays, we don't have to go for a DNC. Rather, you can just go for a PIPL also. Just because, sir, at least we have an idea of how the endometrium is responding or to what exactly will it respond to.
No, Shaijas has told about the ultrasound findings, that is a regular endometrium, thin endometrium.
True, sir. But still, I think, Ramani madam, would you like to get on to that one?
Okay, you can always have.
Not in the reproductive age group, but maybe in a perimenopausal age group, even a thin endometrium which is showing atopic pattern in the HPE can cause abnormal uterine bleeding.
Okay, there is no harm done by taking a biopsy. There's no.
Yeah, I am also, first thing for this particular patient is clinical examination, local speculum, general examination of the pelvis, followed by an ultrasound. You come to the definitive diagnosis whether it is a adenomyosis or a fibroid or a polyp. Then based upon that, if it is going to be a polyp, go straight away for a polypectomy, either histoscopic guided or a thing. And if it is going to be an adenomyosis, you are going to manage medically because she is very young. And if it is going to be a fibroid, then if it is going to be a submucous fibroid only, then the question of histoscopic myomectomy comes. So before that, I think the patient's general condition should be stabilized, or anemia should be corrected, and then we plan whatever it is. But that initial hemostatic approach can be like how I just said, it can be either a tranexamic acid or a progesterone in high dose or a estrogen. And I feel personally it could be endometrial DNC, a complete curettage, which will also be both therapeutic and diagnostic and therapeutic one.
Okay, the next portion of the question, I think team D.
Team D, how will you decide on surgical options if it is going to be fibroids? What will be the selection of cases for histoscopic myomectomy? I think the previous speaker has beautifully.
Dr. Najmuddin, sir, please.
Pardon? Yeah, you can answer. Team D. Team D, who is in team
Audible,
D?
sir, audible.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, this is case of heavy menstrual bleeding, that is menorrhagia and
Not very clear.
fibroid.
Close to the mic.
Not hearing?
Yeah, close to the computer. Okay.
Okay, now hearing?
Yeah, please.
Okay, this patient is having heavy menstrual,
May I raise your voice a little bit more?
heavy menstrual bleeding, and she is having fibroids also. So the surgery is the mainstay of management of fibroids, but according to the location of the fibroid and size of the fibroid, we have to decide what surgical management we have to do for this patient. And
If the medical management fails, you will think of surgical, is it? Or you will go for the surgery according to the size of the patient.
you think of surgical management
Okay.
with fibroid. And this patient is having menorrhagia. Most probably menorrhagia is due to submucous fibroid. So the patient is 35-year-old, and we don't. If she wants to conserve the uterus, anyway she is sterilized, but her age is 35, and if we want to conserve the uterus, we have to plan for myomectomy. That is, for submucous myoma, we can do histoscopic myomectomy.
Okay. Anything else, Subhash?
Sir, now, as we have said that in case of fibroids, and if the patient is symptomatic, definitely yes, we'll go for a surgical treatment, more so in a hysteroscopic for a submucous fibroid. How to decide on a submucous fibroid, whether to go for a hysteroscopy or a laparoscopy or no surgeries? Of course, surgery is definitely an option for submucous myoma. But the thing is, we'll have to see what is the classification of the fibroid, if it's a grade 0, 1 or 2. Grade 0 is something where the whole of the fibroid is inside the endometrial cavity. Grade 1 is somewhere where you have more than 50% of the fibroid projecting into the cavity, but the largest diameter is something which is inside the uterine cavity. Grade 2 is something which is more than 50%, and most of the fibroid is in the myometrium. So basically, for these fibroids, we would not actually go for a hysteroscopic myomectomy. Now, just a couple of practical tips when we go for a surgery. I mean, we go from it's called as progressive regression. You go forward and then come back when you do a resection. How will you differentiate between a myometrium and a fibroid? A fibroid will be less vascular, whereas the myometrium, when you go, it will be more vascular and it will be more pinkish. This is how you make out difference in the surgical aspect. We have Another options which we have the bipolar scope and the monopolar system. Earlier we were using the monopolar systems, but nowadays we do have the bipolar system. Even we are actually personally, I'm also using a bipolar system. The advantage of this using a bipolar is more clear, and secondly, metabolic complications are very less. And this is how you go for a gist about the hysteroscopic part of it. And nowadays we have a newer one. Just for the sake of completion, we have something called as hysteroscopic morcellator, where you just use the word and the fluid, and then it just morcellates. But the problem is it takes an eternity.
We may cut short because
Sure, sir.
Yes.
Sure,
So
sir, sure,
anybody would like to use any other medical management, medical drug for these sort of cases with heavy menstrual bleeding?
Injection GnRH, madam. GnRH analogs for sure.
Then anything else?
Ma'am,
What
I
about
think
ulipristal? Would you like to use it,
Yeah.
ulipristal, for a short term?
you can.
it is a good drug, but then of course we'll have to explain the safety profile to the patient also, because we have had a lot of problems with ulipristal. So let us explain the safety profile to the patient, and if the patient is willing and is in a situation where she will accept it, fine, we go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, I'll tell you one thing is, if you are going to use ulipristal, the bleeding will immediately stop. That is one major advantage with ulipristal. You can build up the hemoglobin, and of course you have discussed about the side effects. But if you are going to use GnRH, the advantages, the size of the fibroid will shrink, but the vasomotor changes in this reproductive age group.
Very bad.
High. So that we have to decide the risk versus benefit when using these drugs. So then coming to team A, how will you diagnose and manage HMG due to adenomyosis? I think Shaijas has already described how he will manage the heavy menstrual bleeding with adenomyosis. Anybody would like to sum up?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to say that this is a multiparous lady, and with abnormal heavy menstrual bleeding, you have 8 to 62% association. So
Yes.
definitely a history of heavy menstrual bleeding, progressive and increasing severe secondary dysmenorrhea, heaviness will help you in diagnosis. Then clinical examination, if it is a localized one, we can get a globular mass on one or the other side. But if it may be uniformly enlarged uterus, but not more than 12 to 14 weeks. And then we have to take the help of transvaginal ultrasound. And Dr. Rishikesh Pai had told us about the details of the ultrasound picture.
Yes.
But the most important thing is you have to see the endomyometrial junction. And we can do a quantitative analysis of junctional zone. It is more than 12 millimeter. We could say definitely that it is adenomyosis. An MRI may be needed if a patient is wanting a conservative surgery where we want to do an adenomyomectomy to differentiate between myoma and adenomyosis. For the treatment aspect, NSAIDs, combined OC pills, progesterone-only pills can be given. Dynogest is a good alternative, can be given even up to 2 years. LNG-IUS can also be inserted. It decreases the uterine volume. And even CA-125 levels, if elevated, may come down with the use of LNG-IUS. Yeah. Then GnRH agonists have their own problems, but recently there's danazol IUCD, which is, I don't know whether available in India, but it is definitely said to be useful. We can give aromatase inhibitors. And if the patient wants conservative management, we may have to go for local excision, adenomyomectomy. Endometrial ablation may not help her because the endometrial implants are deep inside. Then uterine artery embolization, the success rate is only 25 to 80%. So even if we do it, then later on the patient may need a hysterectomy. And MRI is an option.
I would like to interfere.
Yes, ma'am.
Jyoti, for this particular patient who is having a uterine size of 12 weeks, what will be your definite option? I don't want all the varieties of the treatments that are available. For this particular patient with 12 weeks adenomyosis, what is your management?
Endometrium is normal, madam. Even if they can have endometrial carcinoma, if endometrium is normal, LNG-IUS should be the option.
See, but the expulsion rate of, what about the expulsion rate of LNG-IUS in a 12-week size adenomyosis?
Expulsion rate is there about 10%. Then if she expels it, then we put her.
How can you reduce it? How can you reduce the LNG expulsion of LNG-IUS?
But I don't know.
We will definitely start the patient on, ma'am, GnRH analog to reduce the size, and then we'll go ahead and put in a
Yes,
for
that is
LGIUS.
the best
The other
way.
advantage is we get the time period in which the patient would not is actually amenorrheic, so the problem of expulsion and also the problem of bleeding also is very less.
Yes. See, the breakthrough bleeding, what you find in after LNG-IUS insertion is being taken off by GnRH analog, where you can build up the hemoglobin, improve the general condition. Size can be reduced to 30 to 40%. So that is one way. Or otherwise, you can give dynages. But how long you are going to give dynages and the expense that is involved. So instead of that, this Paris woman, she could have been very well put on LNG-IUS. So coming to team D, the last question for this particular thing is a patient who has had a cesarean section 2 years back. Now she complains of irregular bleeding PV. What is the probable diagnosis? Because we see a lot of women with the previous LSCS as the incidence of LSCS is going on when many of the people off late are coming with the intermenstrual spotting. What is the probable diagnosis and how we are going to manage?
Madam? Hello?
Yes?
Madam?
Najmuddin sir, please switch off. Yeah, please switch off the other one. Yeah.
Okay, madam.
Fine.
Yes, sir, fine.
The late complication of cesarean section is probably the isthmosis. That is a defect in the uterine scar.
Sir, your voice is not audible, sir.
That is a defect in the uterine scar. It probably due to the improper healing of the uterine scar of the done by the cesarean, due to the cesarean section, and it will form a pouch and it will collect fluid and blood. That's called isthmosis, and it will cause this abnormal bleeding or intermenstrual bleeding, and also it can cause vaginal discharge and secondary infertility, pelvic pain, and also dysmenorrhea.
Yes. So how
classically the isthmosil.
Isthmosil, that is. Isthmosil of the previous section. How can you avoid it? How can you avoid it?
That is proper approximating of the uterine.
Approximation, maybe you go for a two-layer closure.
Yeah,
two-layer closure. And if it happens, how are you going to correct it? Treatment of isthmosil.
The treatment is definitely surgical management. That is laparoscopic excision of that and
laparoscopic excision and repair of the isthmosil. Suppose if the patient goes into next pregnancy with the isthmosil, what are all the events following that?
There can be scar ectopy.
Yes.
And there can be a rupture of the uterine scar or in the next pregnancy.
So it is always safe to correct it.
Placenta previa, accreta also maybe.
Accreta, all sorts of these problems.
Yeah, that's it. Let us move on to next part of.
Next case. Okay, sir.
Will you take it, madam, or should I? Okay. Want to take it?
You take it, sir. Anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Team B, a 19-year-old unmarried girl with irregular periods, bleeding lasts for about 9 to 10 days at intervals of 45 to 55 days. She is obese, anemic. Again, what is the approach to investigation and diagnosis and management? How will you approach this case?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, please. Yes,
yeah.
Ajit.
Yes.
Ajit.
Ajit, sir. Thank you, Shekaran sir, Ramani madam, and Dr. Kunjumoideen for involving me in this panel. This is a very typical case of anovulatory cycles. So my first diagnosis will be AUBO, but still you have to rule out a bleeding disorder.
Yeah.
That is one you have to keep in mind. Then in the about the examination, the most important thing is the BMI. You already mentioned that she is a quite obese lady. So BMI is the most important thing. Then any features of hyperandrogenism, like hirsutism, then any other features of hyperandrogenism you have to look for. And coming to the investigations, to assess the severity of anemia, of course, a hemoglobin, hematocrit, a platelet count, the bleeding disorders for the APTT, PTINR, And the thyroid function test, TSH, and the serum prolactin are the most important investigation you have to do. And another investigation I would like to do is a 17-hydroxyprogesterone to rule out a late onset congenital arterial hyperplasia. Then, of course, ultrasound has to be done. Then about the management of this case, as the first line management, definitely we go for a tranexamic acid. Then the most important thing is the lifestyle modification. And she's only 19 years, so we have to counsel the parents, reassure them, reassure the girl also. Then if the bleeding does not stop with the tranexamic acid, definitely as a hemostatic, we have to consider giving progesterone in this patient. Previously, there was some discussion on progesterone. Most of the time in patients with regular cycles, I don't prefer a progesterone because it is one of the most important abused drug in the management of AUB. But here is a patient with irregular cycles. Definitely, there is a place for giving progesterone. We'll start with the noradjustrone or norethindrone. But subsequently, you have to consider giving maybe less androgenic progesterone like methotrexate. Then our aim should be to get a withdrawal bleeding at least every 1.5 months, every 45 days, she should get a withdrawal bleeding. So along with the lifestyle modification, you have to consider giving campaign pill or a systemic cyclical progesterone for this patient. Anything to be added, Dr. Ashwini?
The most difficult part is the control of weight and the eating habits of these girls, which is very difficult. You have to be very careful.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
They may be having a low self-esteem. So we have to be very careful. At the same time, we have to achieve the goal of reducing the weight is the most important part of the lifestyle modification. And of course, properly to have a food exercise diary, which they have to keep so that you can check, but they may not do it properly. So this difficult situation of a girl with excess bleeding and obesity with all other features may be seen. And you said about the ultrasound examination and the management of a case. Okay, very good. I think, madam, that says next one is, I think part of it is, she is somehow managing and she reached 26 years, married for 3 years and having infertility is her concern now. She is still having heavy menstrual bleeding. So I'll request the team see to this patient's management.
Now, as her main complaint is, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please carry on.
Now, as her main complaint is infertility, and she is probably a case of polycystic ovarian syndrome, and pathophysiology of PCOS is an ovulation. We can induce ovulation. The first part will be lifestyle modification and reduction of weight, which itself may resume her ovulation and regular cycles. But we can add on oral ovulogenic drugs like the first line would be letrozole, aromatase inhibitors. We can also give insulin sensitizing drugs like metformin along with oral ovulogenic drugs. Another option is clomiphene citrate, which is also a time-tested drug. If it is not responding with oral ovulogenic drugs, we can definitely consider injectable gonadotropins as a second line.
To add to this, she's married for 3 years, so I think we have to consider other causes of infertility also.
Yes, yes.
Male infertility, you have to do a semen analysis.
Yeah.
And before again starting it ovulation inducing agent, I would like to have a regular cycles for at least 2 to 3 cycles. So give her a campaign pill for 2 to 3 cycles and then regularize the cycle and then go for it.
That's the approach which will be helping the girl.
Can I just add on?
Yes, please. Please, Rajat.
I think what Ajit sir pointed out is very, very valid. Many times when they have this track record of anovulatory cycles from their from the time they attain menarche, generally these women as well as these girls as well as their parents have a kind of a fixed mindset that it is only them who's going to have the problem when they get married. And obviously the husband, the male factor would add on a little bit more fuel to the fire, and it will be taken for granted that there is no male factor. And many times they get treated for their anovulation, and finally, months later, you find out that there is a significant male factor which had to be corrected. And most likely, when you advise somebody at 19 to reduce weight, it may not actually work. So this is the best time to help them advise a little bit more about diet as well as exercise. In Kannur, we had brought in a concept called dance to defeat the disease. Okay, and we thought that that worked really well. And it could be anything, because to have a child is a motive. And probably if you have an entertaining mode of taking care of your fitness, then very much, yes, more people are going to take it up. We had almost an auditorium full of people dancing to our tunes just because of this concept that we promoted. So just a word about metformin. I'm sure that we don't want to use it for all now, because it's a very restricted use. We would look at her glucose tolerance test. And if they have an impaired glucose tolerance, then we would put them on metformin. And these women, if they are obese and have been having this long-standing history of irregular cycles, they have a high chance of being belonging to the resistant variety of a polycystic ovarian disease that is possible. So tell them more and more that if you want to have a baby, you might have to get into a very good fitness regime, and that might be your way out to get the baby as well as to get more.
True. That is a very important message. Yes, thank you. I would like to invite the team E.
I think Ramani Madam is adding a point. Madam, can you just unmute yourself, Madam? Ramani Madam, you're still muted. Madam.
I don't know what is the time left. Okay.
Even in an adolescent stage, in an obese girl, the chances of insulin resistance and abnormal glucose intolerance is going to be somewhere about 25 to 30%. And frank diabetes is seen in these adolescent girls in 2 to 3%. So first line at that stage itself, I would investigate her for abnormal glucose intolerance. Okay. Then coming to the infertility part of it, I always advise the male to get the first evaluation done, because it's simple thing. Then go ahead with whatever investigations you would like to do for the female. So these two things I wanted to add up. See, like how Sasha just said, that group concept of dancing and peer group support is very, very needed for these sort of people. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, team E, can you add on to the last, subsequently also having 2 kids.
Good evening, Shekharan sir and Ramani madam and my esteemed co-panelists. Actually, regarding the long-term consequences, this girl is having PCOS and is obese. So most likely when she falls pregnant, she might have increased risk of early pregnancy loss and increased chances of gestational diabetes mellitus and pregnancy-induced hypertensive disorders. So she is a candidate for early screening for GDM. Also talking about the long-term consequences, most of these ladies with PCOS and obesity, about 20 to 30% of them, they are likely to develop impaired glucose tolerance by the time they reach the age of 30, and also frank diabetes, type 2 diabetes mellitus. Also hypertension, they are at high risk of developing hypertension in later life, and coronary artery disease is also, the risk is also increased, probably due to their truncal obesity and dyslipidemia. Also patients with PCOS and chronic anovulation are exposed to unopposed estrogen for a long time, and they stand a risk of developing endometrial hyperplasia and even endometrial cancer. So even if the age is less, that is even in a young lady with PCOS, if she has a history of chronic anovulation and if the endometrium is thick in TVS, we need to actually, it's prudent, I think, to do an endometrial sampling. And regarding the long term, even I think ladies with PCOS, they have a higher risk of developing depression and obstructive sleep apnea also. So all these are important while counseling a patient when she's diagnosed with PCOS, because if you hint about this long-term sequelae, maybe that will motivate her actually to adopt lifestyle changes. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so inducing ovulation and having a pregnancy as their problem doesn't end. Actually, we have to see to their lifelong reproductive age and beyond, even to menopause and other things. They have to be counseled and guided onto those lines, and we have to see to them as progressing well. Next.
Next, I will go to that other case.
This one?
This is a 45-year-old multiparous lady presents with irregular bleeding for the last 4 to 6 months. So then, how will you investigate this particular patient? Multiparous lady with irregular bleeding, which lasts for 4 to 6 months.
Good evening, madam, Ramani madam, and good evening, Shekharan sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Yes. Ma'am, this case, she's a 45-year-old perimenopausal lady. So my in the initial assessment, I would like to do I need to take a proper history to know the pattern, whether she had a prolonged periods of amenorrhea following which she had the bleeding, which more point towards an anovulatory cycle, and the bleeding pattern. And thereafter, I would like to do a physical examination, which is the one which should not be missed at all. The most important being a per speculum examination. So in the per speculum examination, we have to look for any local causes, a polyp, or if possible, and if she's not bleeding at that point, would like to do a cervical cytology the same time. And thereafter, I would like to evaluate the cause of the bleeding. First of all, to rule out anatomical causes, I would like to do a transvaginal ultrasound. I would like to get a transvaginal ultrasound to rule out the organic causes, the palm, any polyps, associate adenomyosis, leiomyoma, or to look at the endometrium specifically, whether the endometrium is regular and thickened or not. If there is a suspicion of a polyp, I would also like to add on to a saline infusion sonography. So after looking for the anatomical causes, then we have to, if it is ruled out, then we have to go for the Cohen part of the classification AUB. I would like to know whether it is an ovulatory DUB or an ovulatory AUB. So an endometrial sampling is definitely indicated, for which we can go for a office endometrial sampling with a PIPL or an endomed. So I would like to take an endometrial sampling as well. And definitely not to be missed is basic blood investigations. That is a complete blood count, ferritin assessment, and thyroid. And definitely pregnancy also has to be kept in mind. So that is also another thing that has to be ruled out.
Okay. Anything else in this age group? You are inclined to have some.
Yeah. So here my most important thing is the main thing to be ruled out here is a malignancy, a CA endometrium, because 1 in 4 cases of CA endometrium, it presents in the perimenopausal age group. So a CA endometrium has to be ruled out first. So that is the main reason we have to look at the thickness of the endometrium in the transvaginal sound, and by getting a endometrial sample, we can always rule out a malignancy, and thereafter only we can go on to the management.
Okay.
Shall I ask you one question?
Sure, ma'am.
What is the chance of getting a sample that is valid in the presence of malignancy? How much it is safe to do only endometrial biopsy? Won't you go for some other? See, suppose if it comes as malignancy, you take it at malignancy.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely.
Still, there is a chance of the patient having malignancy at a local. So then, what is other option will be?
Definitely, then the best option whenever the sample is inadequate is to go for a hysteroscopy and biopsy, ma'am.
Why not DNC? Why not DNC?
DNC, we are not able to visualize the endometrium, and we are not sure that we might get a sample from the diseased area.
Yes. So always it is preferable to go for a hysteroscopy. Then the other question for hysteroscopy is, if it is going to be malignancy, then are you not going to spread the lesion if you are going to put an hysteroscope?
No, it won't increase the chance of it won't spread the disease. Hysteroscopy is quite safe, but in this patient, as the history, everything is suggestive of an anovulatory type of AUB. So my first diagnosis will be AUBO, but still you have to rule out local causes, and we have to do endometrial sampling, especially even though she is multiparous lady, 45-year-old patient with abnormally bleeding, definitely we have to do a endometrial sampling. And if she is getting, even on treatment, she is not responding to the conventional progesterone treatment, then we have to consider doing a hysteroscopy. Or when we do a scanning, you are suspecting an intracavitary lesion, definitely we have to go for a hysteroscopy because it's a see and treat.
Yes.
Vaginal scan, the thickness of the endometrium, the regularity of the endometrium, the midline, the 3-line. If it is disturbed, then you are thinking of something abnormal. And probably the blind DNC may miss the lesion. So that's why nowadays, if you are suspecting something like that, you go for hysteroscopic sampling. Okay, good. And next portion, again, Team E.
What are the probable diagnoses, sir? Probable diagnosis, as Ajit sir pointed out, here the most commonly we are encountering an anovulatory abnormal uterine bleeding. So metropodia hemorrhagica, that's a very common reason. Other
has been taken away. If you are teaching the students, don't use it. Okay. Right. Okay. No, just a comment only. It is just a comment. Sorry. It's just a comment only. You can carry on.
So most probably it would be anovulatory DUB only, anovulatory abnormal uterine bleeding.
Okay.
Other causes would be, it could be anatomical causes like a polyp, adenomyosis, or
pregnancy complications you have to rule out. Pregnancy complications including trophoblastic disease. So that's seen. That's a very easy thing to be ruled out by a test, or a beta SCG level has to be seen in this patient. So any bleeding, you have to think of pregnancy and its complications.
Irrespective of the age. Very true.
Yeah. Right. So what you have got? It's not a malignancy. It's not a malignancy. What will you do?
If it's
again, the 35-year-old lady, we go along with the same management line. When you rule out structural causes, when you rule out malignancy, can you go with the same treatment option that we discussed about the 35-year-old lady?
Yes, sir. We have to go ahead with progesterones. First line, definitely tranexamic acid with NSAID. If it's subsiding, we have to go with progesterones. Continuous progesterone therapy. And if it is anatomical lesions, we have to think accordingly.
Right. Okay.
I think, sir, there is a difference between the previous 35-year-old patient and a 45-year-old female here, because 35-year-old patient was regular cycles. So
this is
that patient, the tranexamic acid, the mefenamic acid, all these things work. Here, this patient may not work. So a systemic progesterone or a Mirena will be a better option here.
Okay. That's very good point. That is, this patient is having irregular periods. So that is also important thing to be remembered. Different scenarios of as per the age and the type of bleeding, we have to decide on the management as such. So that's why we put many different types of cases. Can we move on to the next portion of the case? That is endometrial hyperplasia. Somebody said about it.
Classification of endometrial hyperplasia and how you should manage.
Good evening, Shailen sir and Remini madam. I am Dr. Reena. Okay. According to coming to the classification of endometrial hyperplasia, according to 2014 revised WHO classification, endometrial hyperplasia is classified into two groups: endometrial hyperplasia without atypia and atypical endometrial hyperplasia. This classification is based on cellular atypia only. And WHO modified the previous classification. Earlier classification was 1994 classification. In that classification, endometrial hyperplasia was classified into four groups: simple hyperplasia, complex hyperplasia, simple hyperplasia with atypia, and complex with atypia. But the problem is WHO modified this classification because to improve prediction of clinical outcome and to improve inter-observer reproducibility.
Yeah, because at that time, the four groups, they have sent the sample to many renowned pathologists. They were not agreeing to the final diagnosis of the condition. Anyway, this is simple for us to remember also, without atypia and atypical hyperplasia. That's and management of the condition.
And coming to management, and in the beginning, I would like to counsel the patient regarding if it is a simple hyperplasia without atypia, chance of progression to CA endometrium is less than 5% for the coming 20 years. And likewise, we can simply observe the patient during this period with endometrial sampling every 6 months. And chance of, we are expecting a regression during this period, and chance of regression is more if we are starting progesterone also during this period. And I will counsel the patient regarding all these things, and if she, and also elicit histories like high risk factors, reversible high risk factors like obesity, and any history of HRT, hormone replacement therapy, etc. And if obesity is there, I will counsel her to reduce her weight and modification of HRT like that. And if she's, and coming to medical management, there are medical management is mainly progesterone and continuous oral progestogens or local progestogens like intrauterine progesterone releasing devices. And first line treatment is always LNG-IUS because treatment response is good, and less side effects are there, and bleeding will be reduced more with LNG-IUS. And coming to oral continuous oral progestogens, not cyclical oral progestogen. And the drugs used for continuous progestogens, continuous progestogens we usually use are medroxyprogesterone acetate 10 to 20 milligram daily for 6 months, or norethistérone 10 to 15 milligram daily for 6 months. And during this period, we have to follow up the patient with endometrial biopsy every 6 months. If she regress to normal, well and good, continue for 12 months. And after 12 months, if regresses properly, we can discontinue the treatment. And if the patient is having any high risk factors like obesity, or she is on HRT, etc., we have to follow up the patient annually with endometrial sampling. And if there is no proper regression during this 12-month period, or she progresses to the next stage, or it is not difficult to follow up the patient if she is not willing for follow-up, etc., we can move on to surgical management. And the surgical management is total hysterectomy. If she is a postmenopausal patient, it is total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo oophorectomy. If she is premenopausal, total hysterectomy should be done, and with bilateral salpingectomy should be done, because the ependymal cells are the source for CA ovary in later life. And removal of ovary is decided on individual patients. And the route for preferred route and the mode of surgery at the best one is laparoscopic removal. And endometrial ablation, etc., are not recommended, as there is the complete removal of the endometrial tissue is difficult in endometrial ablation, and also follow-up is difficult as there is Asherman syndrome following endometrial ablation. That is the treatment part of endometrial hyperplasia without atypia. And if it is with atypia, that is atypical endometrial hyperplasia, the treatment is always surgery, because there is a chance of 43% of concomitant endometrial cancer in these patients. And likewise, progression to cancer in this patient is more. For the first four years, there is a chance of progression to endometrial cancer is 8%, and for the cumulative chance of endometrial cancer for the first 9 years is it is, I think, 12% for the 9 years, and for the first 19 years, it is 28%. So always advise for total hysterectomy. Again, if it is in the postmenopausal age group, it is total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo oophorectomy. Premenopausal, again, total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingectomy, and on removal of ovary depending upon the status of the patient and the condition of the ovary, etc. And the route of the surgery, ideal one is laparoscopic removal. Okay, and I
think you have covered everything very correctly, very nicely. Thank you very much for covering all those things. The question remains, what is remaining is a young patient who is having atypical hyperplasia, who is not having children, obese patient, the PCOS patient, she is having menorrhagia, severe bleeding, menorrhagia we mentioned, heavy menstrual bleeding. Sorry for mentioning
Yes,
menorrhagia.
sir.
Okay,
If,
and
patient,
this patient, how to approach? She wants to have one child.
Yes, sir. If she desires for fertility, first of all, we have to counsel the patient very properly regarding the concomitant malignancies and chance of progression to malignancy and coexistent malignancies in the ovaries. If she is ready to retain her uterus, then the best way of treatment is intrauterine device, LNG IUS. Or second line, we can use oral progestogens also. But once the desire to have child is over, we have to remove the uterus at that time.
How frequently you will monitor? How frequently you will monitor this patient while on treatment?
Pardon, sir?
Monitoring this patient.
Monitoring every 3 months. Every 3 months.
You have to have the biopsy done at every 3 months.
Biopsy by people.
Yeah.
People aspiration biopsy every 3 months.
With the Marina in, you can still take the sampling by the people. So it has to be done every 3 months to see that it's not progressing to malignancy, and you have to continue it. And if she is not responding to that, sorry that we cannot help it, but whether to choose between a cancer or a child is the question, very difficult thing to decide. So that is it, what we have to. So that is very well dealt with.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, they want to wind up. Let us wind up.
Yeah. We are finishing. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes, you can, because one more portion is remaining that they have.
Sir, how can we improve the compliance or acceptance of the LNG IUS?
No, that why we are using it, they have to be counsel, and it is the utility of the procedure without a daily taking any drug like progesterone orally and other things. This is once put in, it will be there, and it is quite, they can forget, put it and forget it. That is the thing they say.
But the prolonged spotting associated with it can cause certain religious communities.
Okay.
Spotting can affect their routine. So how to overcome that prolonged spotting, sir?
That is, you have to, sometimes you may add oral progesterone on top of it. Sometimes it may control. It's difficult. It is mainly because of the estrogen deficiency, maybe the breakthrough bleeding may be happening, but it's all difficult. But finally they will settle for a hypomenorrhea and amenorrhea. So that is a good part of it. So the
can be added for some people.
Yes, please. Yes, who can?
Coming to the last question, it is a postmenopausal bleeding. I think we have partly discussed it. Any postmenopausal woman has to be viewed with suspicion when she has a bleeding. And the ideal thing is to go for a hysteroscopy. I think we have mentioned about the hysteroscopy, advantages of hysteroscopy over that. And it is see and treat policy, take a biopsy and classify whether it is malignant or atypical lesion, or then accordingly we can go for management.
Madam, may I just wind up in 30 seconds, ma'am?
Yes, please.
That is what
about this question. The only thing I would like to say about this particular thing is, ma'am, I know Kunimani sir, just 30 seconds.
Yes.
Most often, 2 out of 3 of these postmenopausal bleedings who have actually are atrophic endometrium, which we know.
Yes, that
again, it is always better to go for a hysteroscope, because many a times if you're suspecting carcinoma endometrium, you may actually shed out and you may find a thin endometrium. So it's always better to go for a hysteroscopy. And the only thing, hysteroscopy, when you see for these patients, is when you go inside, you'll see a starry sky appearance, which is characteristic of atrophic endometrium.
Yes.
The only thing which I would like to say. Another one, all those stuff, again, the suspect malignancy more often, more the age of the patient with a postmenopausal bleeding, more the chance of having and always remember, a TVS with a hysteroscopy has a better pickup rate than a TVS alone. I do not mean to say that TVS is bad. No, TVS plus hysteroscopy is about 96.5%, whereas hysteroscopy, TVS alone is about 76%. Better always to go for a combined effort. And that's it. There's one point which I just wanted to convey.
Okay, good. Jyoti, you wanted to say something which is very important, or you can say, Jyoti, and we'll close the session otherwise.
Because it's getting late. Jyoti, one point you want to give?
This FIGO classification, the palm coin has really improved the management and diagnosis of AUB.
Yes. So
That is
everyone
true.
should
That is true.
write
The problem
formula.
is now the problem is that no, the problem is it may go in like that ASRM classification of endometriosis with so many classes. Here you can see the fibroid is classified to 8 groups. Now they are going to divide the adenomyosis also into 4 or 8 groups. They are going to divide the polyp into so many groups. So it will become so many of the subgroup which will be difficult, like the POPQ classification for prolapse. We are not using it daily.
But then basically
endometriosis also is
there
boys.
so that the diagnosis is
Scientific.
conveyed to the
This
other
is
person.
definitely scientific and a better way of classifying it. But as they add on more and more,
That's a problem, and that can be a super specialty.
Yeah, at present it is good, sir, for the diagnosis and management.
Okay.
So I thank
for giving us the opportunity to conduct this panel along with Dr. P.K. Shekharan, and I thank all the panelists who have done their to the best of their ability. Thank you once again.